So Patty emailed me asking me to tell my story about how I fixed my low stomach acid issues. And of course, I just do what I'm told. And most of you know that I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving anybody medical advice. But because I lost my voice for 8 years and couldn't talk at all, and 23 different doctors couldn't figure that out, I really had to dig into a lot of information to find my answers. And that kind of led me to becoming a nutrition author, and for the past 20 years teaching health professionals in more than 40 countries how to help their clients fix the actual underlying causes of problems instead of just covering up the symptoms. But when I was trying to fix my low stomach acid issue, I just want to share all the mistakes that I made, because the mistakes that I made were significant, and just help you understand how I actually fixed my issues, because my case was really complicated and a lot of people are not going to be that complicated. I've had clients that they basically just added some sea salt and that fixed their low stomach acid issue, and I was like, really? Took me 8 years and you just go sprinkle, sprinkle, sprinkle? Get out of here. So that can be a little bit annoying when I had to work so hard for it, and some people just get it really easy. But my problem was not only that I couldn't talk, and so I was trying to fix a reflux issue that was creating that problem, so I had a really big sign of how my progress was, but I also had a lot of bloating, and like when I ate, it just felt like it sat there like a rock in my stomach for hours. So I had a lot of discomfort that I could gauge as well. And what I found over the years is that the people who need to supplement with HCl capsules to fix their low stomach acid the most usually have the most symptoms show up, or magnification of symptoms, when they first start. So in the description below, I'll put a link to this study on mealtime supplementation with betaine HCl, where they kind of created functional dyspepsia, where they turned off stomach acid, and now we see all these symptoms come up from low stomach acid, and then they supplemented with these betaine HCl capsules and really fixed all those symptoms with these people. So you can go through that study if you want to, just so you know that I didn't get this information from a Paw Patrol coloring book or something. But when I first started, everybody was telling me, hey, you're going to feel a warming sensation when you get up to a high enough dose, and then you know you're at the right dose and you can back off a little bit and stay at that dose until you feel a warming sensation again. The study kind of talks about this too, and the reality that I understand now is that most people never feel that warming sensation. There's just too much going on in there. It can kind of depend on the thickness of that mucus layer in the stomach as to whether a person's going to feel a warming or not. So don't use that as a judge like I did. I just kept upping my dose. I worked up to like 13 capsules per meal. It was like I was eating more pills than I was food, and I wasn't feeling anything. So I was like, I guess I just need to start cramming in more. So I don't want you to do that. When we work with clients, we usually cap them at 5 capsules, and that's about the level of what that study was talking about as well. But I wasn't feeling anything, so I didn't understand what was really going on. And I also found that my reflux was getting worse because I was adding more acid into my stomach, but it wasn't yet acidifying that stomach enough to trigger that LES, that lower esophageal sphincter at the bottom of the esophagus, enough to really trigger that to close. So now I had more acid, and more acid was coming up and burning me even worse and making my voice even more painful. So I'm not going to dig into a lot of the things that I talk about here, like HCl mistakes and things like that, but I'll have links in the description below where I go into detail about these different topics, like when I talk about my hernia and stuff like that. So you can go into the description and find videos on some of these topics if I just breeze over them a little bit too quickly. Now, when I first started, I wasn't really eating carbs. I was just eating like green vegetables and such, because I had already figured out that when I ate carbs, I felt a whole lot worse. And a lot of people make this mistake that they'll eat a lot of carbs when they start HCl, and if they have an overgrowth of some type of bacteria or yeast, mold, fungal type thing in their digestive tract, when they eat carbs and use HCl, those carbs can really activate that bacteria, and then they put out more gases and more pressure, and then that pressure pushes everything back up, and now you added more acid in there, so the reflux is even worse. So I wasn't doing that. I wasn't eating carbs, but I also found that I had to eat foods that were easier to digest. Things like eggs. Eggs are a protein source that's a lot easier to break down when a person doesn't have enough stomach acid. Like white meat protein, like white meat chicken or maybe fish. I was doing better with those, and as I started to improve using the right dose of HCl and feeling like I was digesting a little bit more, I was able to change those proteins up a little bit. But the problem for me, why I was taking so much HCl and not really feeling anything, was because I had an H. pylori infection, and that has the ability to reduce your body's ability to make HCl, but they can also neutralize acids. So you may be making some acids, but if there's an H. pylori infection, the stuff that they put out can really neutralize those acids, so it's like you're not really making any. So once I started taking steps to get rid of an H. pylori issue, as well as a SIBO issue like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, when I was taking steps to reduce those, then the HCl that I was using became more effective. And I talk a lot about the steps that I use, like D-limonene and a supplement called Intestable and mastic gum and celery juice, steps that I was taking just to reduce that overload a little bit so that the HCl that I was using could actually acidify my meals and help me digest a little bit better. So once I was taking those steps, my recovery to feeling better, feeling a little bit less bloated and such, and having less burping and things like that, was only a few weeks of kind of reducing that overgrowth and using HCl correctly. Because I also had a hiatal hernia that was kind of restricting that LES valve from closing correctly. So I'll be sure to have a link to my video on how I fixed my hiatal hernia if you need to dig into that a little bit. But once I started to work on that and see improvement, then I really started to see improvement to my voice as well. So there were layers of things going wrong with me that I had to dig through. But the voice wasn't really back yet. It was just getting better, and I was starting to be able to eat other things. Like I could eat, chicken legs, which are kind of like in between light and dark meat, and then I started to be able to do like chicken thighs and then some steaks and just darker things that are a little bit harder to break down sometimes. But with this improvement, as my voice started to get better, I would start to feel better, but then I would have to backslide, and I would say, oh man, now I'm feeling a little bit worse, and I didn't really understand what was going on. And even to continue to feel better, I had to use HCl this whole time. So what I found out was that I had a tooth issue, and I fixed this pretty early. I had an infection in an old root canal that had caused trouble, and there was like bacteria in there that was just feeding down into my stomach all the time. So I had taken steps to wipe them out, but I just had this source kind of feeding in there all the time. And then it took me quite a while longer to find out that I also had a sinus infection that was also feeding down into my esophagus. So once I fixed those things, then I wasn't having this back and forth. My steady improvement just kind of stayed there. But again, I still had to use HCl to make all this happen. I would have these things come up like, one of the problems that really created trouble for me is that I had a hemochromatosis issue, which is a hereditary issue that causes you to absorb too much iron. So I had this iron overload issue, and when you have all this iron in the system, it can create inflammation, but it can also feed a lot of pathogens and really help them thrive, so it can make it harder to get rid of these overgrowth issues. So I fixed this iron issue, but then I had problems where I kind of stopped doing that for a while. My iron went high and I didn't really realize it, so when things started to get worse again, I was like, oh, I got to take care of this. I also had a lot of inflammation that I was creating from eating a lot of high AGE foods just from the way that I was cooking, and that was creating a lot of inflammation and leaky gut type issues. So I had to kind of figure these things out, and it took me time to make these things happen. Everybody doesn't have to start from scratch. They can learn from my mistakes, but it took me a lot of effort to get through all this to get everything working. So I was also really stuck in this fight or flight state. So my body was kind of in this sympathetic side of the autonomic nervous system all the time, just from the stress that I was dealing with, but also the stress that my body was dealing with, just from all this inflammation and invaders and different types of inflammatory problems that were going on. And once I was able to pull my body out of that fight or flight state and allow it to move into that parasympathetic state where it has the ability to produce HCl, it's hard for the body to make HCl when it's stuck in fight or flight. So once I was able to do that, then I was able to reduce the amount of HCl that I was using when I supplemented with it with meals. And before I fixed all the inflammatory issues in my body, I was able to do things like, breathing exercises and using a vagus nerve stimulator that could kind of move my body into that parasympathetic state. And I have videos about all those kind of things that I'll put below as well. But those seem to help my body get into the right state when it wasn't going there naturally, and then that allowed me to reduce my HCl amount that I was supplementing with as well. And again, I've seen a lot of clients just be able to fix this by just adding sea salt or just reducing an overgrowth, and then within a month or two they don't even need the HCl anymore because now their body's making it. For a lot of people, they can't make it because the body doesn't have resources. So once they stimulate that digestion enough so they can break down the food and get all the minerals that the body needs to make HCl out of their food, then they didn't really need to use that HCl anymore. And that was one of the other hurdles that I had to move past too, because I had been using PPIs for years and turning off stomach acid. And we've talked in other videos about studies that have shown that long-term PPI use can restrict specific nutrient assimilation and absorption and such. And so I created some trouble there where my body didn't have the resources to do that. So while I was synthesizing digestion with these HCl capsules, I was improving my ability to let my body access all of these nutrients. And then I was also using a digestive enzyme called digestizyme from Empirical Labs. And this particular enzyme contains zinc and some other cofactors that your body needs to be able to start making more of its HCl. So I kind of view that as a step that I took that allowed me to decrease the time that I might need to use that HCl once I fixed these other issues. And we're not the manufacturer of that supplement. That's just what we use with our clients. I'm not saying that you should use that, or if you use that, it's going to fix everything that's been going wrong in your body for the past 30 years. But I'll put a link in the description below just so you can kind of see what we're talking about. But it's important to be able to have the nutrients that your body needs to be able to generate its own HCl, so then that can reduce how much you need to supplement with. And then instead of looking for a warning to know that it was time to reduce my dose, I just looked to reduce those symptoms. And then when they were gone, could I remove a capsule and bring that dose down a little bit and have the symptoms stay away? When I couldn't, I knew I needed to go back up. And when I did well, then I knew I could test out going lower until I eventually didn't need any. But I've also seen clients that needed to use it for years, like I did. I needed to supplement with HCl for years. And think about the fact that, yeah, that's really annoying to have to use supplements every time you eat food, but it's better than the horrible symptoms that I was dealing with. I couldn't talk. I was a mime. It was not a good time. So it's a lot better for most people just to be able to fix the problem manually, even if they have to use HCl, while they work through these troubles to help the body function the way that it's supposed to function. So I don't need HCl now, but I still carry it with me sometimes if I eat out or something, or if I'm going like out of town or somewhere where I'm not sure whether they know what they're doing when they're making their food, and I want to make sure that I can kill off anything that's going in there. But I don't need to use it with every meal all the time like I did for so long. So just be patient with yourself. Understand that there can be layers of things going wrong. It's not always just about one thing. Most people are looking for one answer to the problem. And once you have digestive malfunctions, it has the ability to create other trouble that can cause digestive malfunctions as well. So most people that are dealing with significant symptoms usually have more than one thing going wrong at a time. So you might have to work through that a little bit to allow the body to function the way that it's supposed to. If you get stuck with stuff like that, we'll have links to our totally free digestion course that kind of walks you through figuring out which aspects of digestion are not working correctly and steps you can take to improve those. And I'll also put our video for full digestive reset that really goes into a lot of depth how to figure those types of things out. But I hope this helps you understand why some people can fix the problem really easily and quite quickly, and other people it's going to take quite a bit more time. And that's okay in either scenario as long as a person fixes the problem. So if you've started to use betaine HCl capsules and maybe you had trouble using it or you're not understanding what to do, jump over right now and check out our video on 9 betaine HCl mistakes that you want to avoid. I can't wait to hear about your results.